Welcome back to another episode of Music with Matt. This is the podcast where we explore music and how it intersects with people's lives in various ways. We've had all kinds of really informative guests on at this point, right? We've had some sociologists, we've had some recording engineers, and today we have somebody who's got their hands and feet and all parts of their body in several aspects of this industry. Rod, do you want to introduce yourself?
Cool. Yeah, my name is Rodrigo Fernandez-Stoll. I've actually been best buds with Baker for, I want to say, 30 years.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah, I'm an actor, comedian, singer in the Canadian scene. I do a lot of musical comedy. I have some albums out called Fog and Lasers, which are a collaboration between musicians and comedians. They were like it started out as kind of a just like an assignment where we were like, can we make a song that sounds like a real song, but is just the most ridiculous thing ever, which is how we came up with the song Whip Your Dick and Tits Out.
Right.
And then...
was that the first one?
That was the very first one.
Right.
And then we made that song. And then it just turned into a bunch of musician friends were like, do you want to do a song together? And like, it just turned into this thing where I was like, what if one musician comes over the studio, we sit down for 15 minutes and talk about our day and then try to come up with a song from that. And
Interesting.
It worked. That's how we made the first album. And then the second album was just a bunch of, the second album was like a pandemic album that we were like, let's just make another album because everyone's at home. So,
right. That's interesting. And I was really curious to know, actually, before meeting up with you today, I was just kind of chuckling to myself because I'm like, I know your music very well.
Because you've played in the shows.
Right, yeah. So I had the fun opportunity, obviously, of playing in the Fog and Lasers bands for the shows that have happened. And so obviously listened to those records like a bunch. But yeah, before today, I was kind of like, that's so funny. I've never really actually thought about what the creative process would look like for you. Because one thing that I'll say is, I mean, like, first off, you're an incredible musician. You have an amazing voice. And I think
Thanks.
that I think it's such a beautiful marriage of your ability to act and perform, but then also use your musical talent. But another thing that I was thinking about too is how with each of these songs, you do such a good job. Like, it sounds like you do a really good job of kind of capturing the essence of whatever it is that you're focusing on, and then you channel that into the song. But I would say also you do such a good job of working within different genres. Like, a lot of the Fog and Lasers music, it's not all the same. Like, you've got rock songs, you've got like hip hop songs, you've got sort of slow grooving R&B stuff, you've got like techno dancey stuff, you know?
Yeah, I mean, that's usually on purpose because we try to, I would say my writing partner, Chris Rennick, we work a lot together. So we'll try to sit there, and when writing something, either I'll come up with a vocal melody or something where I'm like, oh, I have this idea for a song. Do you have any music that could go with it? Or the other way around, where Chris will send me instrumentals that he's done and go, I have this weird, weird acoustic track, or I have this weird dance track. Do you have anything for it? And just by chance, it'll happen where, I'll be walking around, I'll be in my car, something will come up, and then I'll go home, go through whatever options he sends me, and then I'll just kind of jam on whatever.
Okay.
And it works out like that. So we kind of have this back and forth. That's usually how it goes. If not, I also make stuff with Gavin, who you interviewed on the podcast.
Yeah.
And Gavin is different because Gavin will just be like, come by the studio, let's sit down and just make something out of nothing.
Yeah. Right.
And it's really fun to do it like that. It does take more time. I do really enjoy being at home because I have my mic at home, and I do enjoy sitting there and just going through stuff on my own in the beginning, because It helps me structure the song. I can like cut things up and kind of make whatever it is that I want to make in the session. And then I send that to Chris, and then he will mix it and like kind of add whatever to it. And then we send that to a bunch of different musicians, and we say, is there anything you want to add?
Right.
And they kind of add, usually it's like they'll add something, and it's, it makes a song completely different from what we thought it was going to be. And that's kind of what the process was for the last like few years. It's really, really, it is very interesting too, because now at least we have a community where I know what someone can give to something.
Right.
So I'll say like, there's the amazing flute player Anne Fung.
Right.
She's incredible. And I messaged her one day about a rap song that we were doing called So Wretch, and we didn't even think about it. We were like, and I like we had the song over and over. We recorded it. We thought it was done, and I said, what if it just had some sort of like, what if it had flute? And then I sent it to Anne, and she added these. She riffed on it. She just kind of like riffed and recorded a bunch and sent it to me. And then I sat there one morning for like 2 hours and just went through every single little piece that she did. And I kind of placed them in different spots, and it worked out. It just sounded like this really cool, like a real song. And when I say real song, I mean something that you would listen to and not consider it like comedy right away.
Right. And that's actually a great distinction to make, because I know that Wes and I have talked about this before where, and maybe it's because we're musicians or something like that, but it's like, excuse me, I'll speak for myself, like personally a little less enjoyable if you see, or rather something I don't really enjoy, when you see a stand-up comedian that maybe grabs like an acoustic guitar and just strums a couple chords and makes sort of like a joke song. And I think that's the difference. Like you said, where you're like, no, these songs are, quote unquote, real songs. Like, and then they just happen to have just ridiculous and
hilarious
lyrical content,
But that's the point, right? Like the music, if you took the lyrics off, like the music stands up.
Yeah.
Right. And I love what you just said there too with that collaborative piece, because when I think of Fog and Lasers, I've seen the show a number of times. And most recently, just a few months ago, it was amazing. But what like my favorite part about it was just the amount of people on stage, right? And the amount of like collaboration that transpired. Like obviously you're front and center and sort of spearheading the show, but there's like, I mean, how many musicians did you have on stage?
Yeah.
How many backup singers, right? And then even like the comedy scene, like the Toronto comedy scene, like there was a bunch of members of that coming to pitch out for different sort of songs there. So
and that's what, and I feel like that just sort of the whole Fog and Lasers thing again, it sort of typifies some, like a big part of, I think, how I perceive you as a performer, where again it's like this amazing intersection where, so you're on stage, you're performing, you're being like theatrical, and you're acting in these various like different characters, but then just as Wes said, you're also able to incorporate this amazing collaboration, not only with like actors and comedians that you're friends with, but now also musicians as well. It's like this awesome, melting pot of all these different folks that come together,
Yeah, that's what Fog and Lasers is just the community. Because when I first started in comedy, it's so hard to break into something.
Right.
When the entire point is just to create with other people, and like I mean I've tried to get into I do stand up, but that's not like my main thing.
Right.
Like tonight I'm going to do a stand up show, but it's more of a performance based thing, which it took me a long time to realize like that was more of my route where I wanted to go. But with sketch and film and music, I just find it's so much better to create with a group of people.
Right.
Like when you're working on a film set, it's just, there's no way one person can do everything. You're literally sitting in a group of people where everything every single person's job matters. So when it comes to something like Fog and Lasers, I'm just like, yeah, like it's a team. Let's do this. Let's all create. Let's make a community. And I think that also comes from watching, like I said, when I first started, all the people that I looked up to when it came to performing and comedy, like Dwayne Gretzky, who is a lot of the collaborators on the album and in the show, like Tyler Kite and Jill Harris and them, Lydia Prasad, like they all work together so well, and I always kind of like looked up to them in that way, and I'm like, I want to be that type of performer. I want to be the person that, like, you know, someone says like, we're making something, what can you add to it? So I feel like that's kind of my mind every single time when I make something. I'm like, okay, who else can make this better?
Right. And I would say that you definitely channel that vibe with the Fog and Laser stuff, being obviously a part of the performance side of it. It is absolutely that. Like, what's so incredible, and people in the band comment on this too, is just like, you know, it's sort of just the floor is open. There's room for people to say, oh, I was thinking about maybe playing something like this. And then everyone else just goes, yeah, great. That's awesome. It's not like people are trying to really control it and saying, no. It's not like that. Like, if you listen to the record, it has to be identical to that.
No,
it's the opposite of that.
And there's a reason why you're playing it live. It's like,
yeah,
here, it's a chance to make it sound different, or make it sound, or create something on the spot. A cool moment actually was Rich Knox, who Rich Knox, who's the drummer for Danko Jones, and he drums for Dwayne every now and then. He had I made a song called "Give Me the Wi-Fi" with him,
right?
And that came out of nowhere. That was like, literally, that was one of those things where Rich had said, come over, what are you doing? Come over to my place and let's just riff for a little bit. And I was in such a, I'm not the most, if anything, I'm not the most, like, I'm not always inspired.
Right.
So it really is one of those things where if I'm not inspired, I'll just sit there and be like, yeah, nothing's really coming to me. Like, maybe in a couple of days, I'll take it home and listen to it. But that moment I walked into his apartment, I think I had just, I don't know, at the time, I think I had just smoked a joint or something, and I just walked into the room and sat down, and Rich was like, yeah, I just, came up with this beat or whatever. He played it. I asked for a piece of paper, and I wrote down all the lyrics right away.
Wow.
And we recorded it, and that was it. And I swear it was in the span of like 20 minutes.
That's incredible. So the fact that you're able to just capitalize on that in the moment is just so amazing.
It was the coolest, one of the coolest things ever, or just one of those moments where you're like, okay, we just made this thing. Don't touch it. It's great.
Right.
It's fine. And, it was so dumb. It was just this like stupid little track. And then, people that were listening to it were like, no, that's one of the best ones on the
right.
album. And we were kind of sitting there being like, okay. But Rich is very, very much this amazing performer, where we also I did this other song, which you played guitar on when we did it live. I Know It Exists, that song, which it's one of my favorite songs, because that was one of those songs that came out of nowhere.
Right.
It honestly came out of, it came out of another comedian who is musical as well, Al Val. She sent me a random guitar track.
Right.
That was off of her iPhone.
Right.
Basically saying like, what do you think about this? And I took that guitar track. It sounded like shit, but I made it into a sample, and I found the beat, and I literally took a chunk out of it, put that in, and I recorded my vocals on top of that, and then I gave it to Ferd from the Elwins. I gave it to him. He put on some guitar, and then we were like, okay, well, what else are we going to do with it? I gave it to Rennick. He kind of structured it together.
Right.
And then all of a sudden I had this song, and I showed it to Rich, And Rich said, give me like a day. Give me like 2 days. And I said, okay. And one morning I woke up and Rich was like, hey, last night I went into the studio and recorded a couple of drum tracks to this song. And it was like just this banging rock track. Where I was like, I don't care in 10 years if I hear this, I will be like, this is still a sick track.
Yeah. Right.
Anyway, it was just moments like that where I was like, everybody added something to it. It was just this thing where, you know, and also nobody ever met in person. Everybody was like, I'll add to it.
That's interesting.
Oh, maybe I'll add something here. Maybe I'll add a little bit here. And they would just send whatever they did to Rennick, who pieces everything together.
Right.
But with that, it's like that's what I'm saying is this idea of I love the idea of giving everyone a chance to say something or like record something.
And no matter how big or small it is too, like even if it's just like that little guitar line that you had mentioned, and that leads into this massive piece where now you're collaborating with other people, right?
I think I owe it all to Al Val, because she would be playing stuff just randomly and recording it on her iPhone and then just sending it over. I mean, we did another song too called Super Secret Orgy.
Right.
And that happened the same way. Right. Where I mean, I don't know what it is. I just love the idea of taking something that could be absolutely nothing but it doesn't happen every single time. Like I said, sometimes I'm sitting there going like, I got nothing.
Right.
But I would say it happens 1 out of every 10 tries where we actually do come up with something. So I mean, it's just I think that's where it comes from, is my my comedy background, where you go and you just try stuff out.
Right.
And sometimes you're just going to bomb in front of people. Like, I mean, I chat about it with other comics all the time, and you're like, how did your set go last night? And they'll be like, oh, I bombed like hard.
Right.
And like, I'm pretty sure the last 2 shows I did, I bombed really hard, but there was probably like one little tiny joke that went well. And I'll be like, oh, I'll do that joke again.
Right. So
But
that's
yeah.
that's like the equivalent of you getting that sort of voice memo guitar track where you're like, well, maybe the majority of the stuff you hear isn't stuff that you could see working in a song, but you get that little bit
out of 3 minutes. Yeah.
Right.
Out of 3 minutes of stuff, I'll hear probably a good 6 second little riff, and I'll go, that's what the song's going to be. That's what the main riff in the song is going to be. And then we go from there. And I usually add a lot of I add the vocal stuff.
Right.
But with that, I find that helps structure the song, and then everybody just kind of adds on top of there. And for me, that's kind of the way writing songs has been now, with being able to just easily plop it into the session and then send that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that too, because sometimes, when it comes to creativity, it just flows out of you, right? And you, like you said, with the Wi-Fi track, where you're able to just go in and literally write the song front to back in the moment. But for the most part, like, there is a bit of a struggle to like really piece something together. And like you said, you know, maybe 1 out of every 10 songs comes that easy. The other 10 is like a bit more of a chore. So like, do you find sometimes when you're collaborating or when you're writing or whatever, like you do kind of go through that struggle a bit when you're trying to put something down or trying to like meet a deadline or get something out? Or
there has been a couple of times during the first album of Fog and Lasers, there was a couple of times where we had nothing. Hunter Collins came in, another really hilarious comic, and he's also a drummer. And he came in, and there was in the studio space that we had at the time, Gavin's studio space. There was a drum set up, and you were there. Yeah, it was that basement sort of thing.
Oh yeah.
Well,
that's where we did the Venom track, I think. Right?
Which was actually in the same realm of how we did it, was because Hunter came, and then we all sat down and we were all kind of talking about stuff, and then nobody had any ideas, and then it was kind of like, do you guys just want to go in the studio and press record and just jam for a bit and see if anything comes out? And that's how we came up with, I think it's the last song on the album, called Tito, and it's just us jamming. And I was like, oh, it's kind of like a punk song sort of thing. And I don't know. I just thought it, in a way, it was just this like really chaotic little song that my girlfriend Gwen, another comic she's hilarious, but sometimes she questions my work, which is good to have. It's good to have that person in your life. But she'll be like, what is this? She'll be like, what is this? And I'll be like, it is. And I'll always respond with, hey, it is what it is, you know?
Right.
Like,
it's its own thing now.
It's its own, that's, you know, whatever it means to you, which I do believe. I hate explaining songs.
Right.
Or I hate explaining things. So I'm always just like, whatever it means to you, go nuts. And that's what it means. But sometimes, obviously, there is an explanation or a story behind it, but I don't need to give it to anybody. I don't know anybody an explanation.
That's right, for sure.
But we made that track like that, and also I'm pretty sure Venom was kind of like that. I think the main riff was just from that riff.
That's the Rod riff. Yeah,
the only riff I knew for like the longest time, and I'd be like, "This is gonna be a song one day," and then one day I was like, "It's gonna be the Venom song."
That's amazing. And you know what's actually what I just thought about with that riff was, you know, many moons ago when we were at Comedy Bar and you hosted Sunday Night Live with the Sketchersons, and I was playing in the house band, and we'd play songs in between through the transitions between sketches, and one night I was like, hey guys, check out this riff, and we played the Rod riff. It was before Venom too. And it was like, because obviously like Rod and I have known each other forever and like played in bands for so many years, so it's like, oh, I've heard the Rod riff big time. And
that's great.
And the classic Rod drum beat too, which is in I forget what
Jar
track.
Hands Man.
Yeah. And like, so we were preparing for the show.
That's hilarious.
And listening to it, and it just struck me where I'm like, wait a second. I'm like, that's the Rod drum beat, you know, which is amazing.
But Jar Hands Man, the way I recorded that one was Gwen bought me a drum machine.
Oh, cool.
And that was the first, and I figured out how to record onto my computer. So I was like, oh, okay, this is great. First drum beat I played was that one, and I recorded that, and I had it in like my folder of like beats, literally the only beat I had. And then I riffed on it for a bit, and then came up with Jar Hands Man, and then I slid it on top of that beat, and it just worked out. But it's just funny how, like, you know, it just...
That's amazing. But what's great, too, though, is this, like, very much in line with your creative process. Because it's, like, even that drum beat, you hooked up the drum machine, you figured it out, and then you go, oh, and you just did a beat, and you're like, yep, that's cool. And then there shows up later in an actual song, you know?
Yeah, I now, at least now, I kind of feel that... Because I didn't used to be like this, where if I had an idea, I never was like, I'll shelve that, or I'll save it for a rainy day or something. Now I'm like, any idea, I'm like, oh, that could be something in 4 years.
Right.
You know, like, I have no idea.
That's cool, though. That's really cool. So this is something also I'm curious to know. We touched upon it earlier, but with your material, you do such a good job of creating different songs in different genres. So obviously we've heard the creative process as one that's sort of inspiration that strikes in the weirdest ways. Just kidding. That was a little reference to Make Out with a Relative, but anyway, so, you know, inspiration strikes, you just kind of you're able to capitalize on that moment, and then it turns out into this full song. But you do such a good job of creating different songs. So and working within different genres and stuff like that. So would you say that is that a conscious choice, or is that more so a reflection of like the different folks that you work with?
It is.
Okay.
It's the different folks, like, which is something that we really do think about. Like, one person is Tyler Kite, who is the lead. Yeah, one of the lead singers in Dwayne.
Incredible
Gretzky.
singer.
Incredible
and
singer.
Just an amazing person too.
Incredible. Like, I would say, I mean, I've done my albums, like Fog and Lasers albums, but I would say that he's definitely the type of guy that you would want producing your album.
Yeah.
He's a very good arranger. He's he's got a great ear for what sounds good. Like, he basically made Grammy, the Grammy song. And that all came from him just playing the piano.
Right.
And being like, I want something with a big chorus. And we just sat there and like went through different lyrics. But he was the brains behind that song. But the genre thing comes from probably, I mean, it sounds so hippie, but it's like someone's vibe, you know, when they come into a room, you're like automatically like, I did this like, I don't know, I guess I want to say like 1940s, I guess a 1940s, 1950s type of song with Jill and Meg Contini and Jill Harris. And they have this like Andrew Sisters sort of vibe. And when I think of the Andrew Sisters, I think of like, you used to play this Les Paul CD.
Oh yeah.
And I think of like, what is it? Man on the Moon or
How High the Moon.
How High the Moon.
Yeah.
And I remember that song.
Yeah.
So with that track, into that world, I tried to get into like an Andrew Sisters thing with them. And for some reason, we just started riffing. I wrote out some lyrics, and the song was about an obsessive fan for Jaromir Jagr. But
yeah, that song's
I
incredible.
met up with them before we recorded it. I met up with them at a cafe, and they grabbed the lyrics, and they would be like, okay, well, like, maybe we can cut this out. This won't fit here, but like, let's do this. And we just all kind of gelled together, and they made it sound unreal.
Yeah.
Like, they made it sound so good. But it was just out of like, you know, hearing what they do. And I was like, okay, maybe we can do something like that. I don't know. It's like, from what we were saying in the beginning of just, it really is just like an open room.
Yeah.
Like whatever you want to add. There was a night where we were finishing up the Grammy song, and Lydia Prasad came in to hang out in the studio to listen to the song.
Right.
And then all of a sudden it was like, hey, Lydia, can you add some like big belting vocals at the end? And she came in and she just ripped it. She was like, sure. And then she just fucking went nuts at the end.
Right. That's so cool.
Yeah. Or, so it really is just this, I think that's the spirit of Fog and Lasers, and at least my creative realm, where you just kind of say, anyone's welcome, whatever you kind of want to bring. It's okay not to have an idea. Like, I don't, I'm never going to be like, you have to bring an idea.
Okay, and we're going to stop things right there. So that's going to mark the end of episode number 1. But stay tuned, folks, for episode number 2, where we're going to learn a little bit more about Rodrigo's process and how he identified himself as a performer.
Thanks, everybody, for listening. That was a blast, and feel free to connect with us on any of our socials.